Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you join us for the first ever LinkedIn Lead Accelerator Optimization webinar, where we will discuss how to get maximum performance out of your LinkedIn Lead Accelerator. Presenting today on behalf of LinkedIn is Rachel Rickles, Marketing Automation Consultant Manager. First, a couple housekeeping items. We invite you to ask the speakers any questions you might have using the Q&A box. And we'll take time to answer those questions during the Q&A portion following Rachel's presentation. We will also be sending a recording of the webinar along with the slides to you via email following the event. And if you want some more up-to-date LinkedIn Lead Accelerator information, you can follow us at LinkedIn MKTG. And now, without further ado, I'll pass things to you, Rachel.
Awesome, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So as Cassandra mentioned, we're going to be talking about some best practices for optimizing your Lead Accelerator program. And so some of those things that we're going to talk about today is, one, understanding your Lead Accelerator metrics. So what to look for, what do these metrics mean, and how to really read these reports. And then we're also going to move into some optimization basics. So what do we as marketing automation consultants look for when we start optimizing the Lead Accelerator program? And then we're also going to talk about nurture contact usage and audience filtering. So one of the great things about this program is that you can really hone in and focus on specific audiences, but when you maybe need to pull back or when you need to add in additional filtering to optimize your contact usage. And then also just going to touch on a couple other things to look out for. So creative best practices, landing page best practices, etc. So let's go ahead and move into metrics. So when looking at the nurture stream performance, this is really what you're going to what you're going to see when you first log into the dashboard. And we obviously have a couple of main metrics here that most people, I'm sure, on this call are used to. So impressions, clicks, CTR. Now, what I'm going to focus on today is actions, impressions per action, and post-click actions. And really because the reason why I'm focusing on these metrics is because this is really what we focus on for Lead Accelerator. So let's start with actions. Actions are the total number of actions that are generated from the program. So this is inclusive of both post-click and post-view conversions. And to clarify, actually, an action is whatever we want it to be. So it can be a landing page hit, so a key engagement point, like a video play or a blog post visit. It can also be a form fill submission, so an actual gated piece of content. So it can really be anything that you want to track as far as this program is concerned. Impressions per action is essentially measuring how efficient the program is. So how many impressions does it take to generate one action? And really, in this case, the lower the number, the better. But typically for benchmarks, we see anywhere from like 10,000 up to 20,000 impressions per action. And this is also caveated by the fact that this really depends on the goals of your program, whether you're using a combination of gated and ungated assets, as well as what your offer is. Because if you have a higher friction piece of content, these numbers, this impression per action, is probably going to be higher than if you have very low friction content offers. And then finally, post-click actions. So we have this actually broken out here so you can determine how many post-click actions you have compared to your total actions. Now, the ratio here, we do like it to be, actually in this example, we like it to be closer than farther apart as far as the ratio is concerned. But we do see a lot of the time that, that post-click actions are not always in line with total actions. And that's because of a number of reasons, which we're going to get into in just a few minutes. But it can be due to lack of running all channels. It can be high friction content. There's a number of variables to consider when looking at this metric. Now, one other piece of data that I actually didn't show in this screenshot, but is also available within the dashboard, is cost per action. So when you are measuring CPA, again, you want to consider what type of content you're using, whether it's gated or ungated. But that is also available to you in this dashboard, is cost per action. Now, I also want to move into understanding the usage report. And the usage report is really important because this actually shows us how many contacts we have the availability to nurture. And so in this case, you can see that we have a 30,000 contact band limit. And what that means, I like to use an analogy of like a football stadium. And so you have essentially 30,000 seats in this football stadium to fill. Now, the closer you get to that number, the more optimal your performance is going to be, mainly because you're able to nurture as many contacts as you've bought into, right? So if you've only filled about half of that stadium, you're potentially missing out on some revenue there. But if you're way over that limit and you're at, let's say, 40 or 50,000 contacts, then it's really not a good user experience, and you might have people that you're not touching enough. They're not getting a good view of the game, as you might say. So the other thing that I want to touch on here is the average contacts that you're nurturing. So this takes the total month that we're running, and this, as you can see, is actually all in month view. So it takes the given month, and it essentially averages the number of contacts that we're able to touch over this given time. And so we can see that actually graphed out here. And one thing to note here as well is that your number of contacts will fluctuate on any given day. And so that's something to take into consideration too. I also want to note here that it will take some time for your contacts to ramp up when you first launch your program. And so you do want to give yourself at least a month and a half to really see this number start to level off when you can start to make optimizations here. One other point that I just want to make here as well is that we do recommend being within about a 10% range of your contact band limit. Again, this will give you optimal performance, so you don't want to be too far above or too far below when looking at this report. Awesome. So now let's move into some basics of optimization. So now that we have an understanding of the metrics that we're looking at and rating, we can start to think about optimizations to make. Now, I also want to caveat this by saying you do want to give your program some time to ramp before you start making some major adjustments to your program. But when first looking at this and looking at optimizations to make, first step that I look at is whether or not all streams are launched. So after your Launchpad session with your marketing automation consultant, have you launched all of the streams? So the whiteboard session that we do where you have the segmentation broken out and all of your waves identified, have you launched everything? And also, how long have your streams been running? So that's a key piece before you start making adjustments to the program, is whether or not you've launched your full strategy. So second thing to look at is whether or not you've launched all channels, and that means Facebook Newsfeed, LinkedIn sponsored content, and all of your display advertising. And the reason for this is launching all channels is going to give you the most reach and a better chance at having high performance. Facebook Newsfeed and sponsored content especially is great for performance. We see pretty high conversion rates against these two channels, and display really gives you the reach that you need in order to get in front of those audiences wherever they may be online. So on top of channel usage, the other thing that we look at is performance by creative. Now, you saw in the previous slide several different channels, but what I didn't show you was actually A/B testing. So creative is a great way to A/B test both your message, your image, all of your various things, also all of your sizes. So especially, let me go back a little bit, especially with your social advertising, A/B testing can be very easy to do because a small change or adjustment in the copy that you have for your social ads can make a really big impact on the performance. So that's something you definitely want to consider when launching this program and making optimizations, is adding in some A/B testing. So in this scenario here, this example, we can see that we have two 300 by 250 rectangle banners. I actually circled the performance here, and these I didn't have a headline here, but you can see impressions on the left-hand side, clicks, CTR. What's circled here is actions and impressions per action, because that's really what we want to take a look at. This program is focused on lead generation, so how many actions did we get per creative? And in this case, what I would do is actually, as an optimization, is pause this top banner. And the reason why is because we're seeing that we have 9 conversions against this banner with almost 22,000 impressions per action. So if you compare that to the banner below, we're seeing 22 total actions with impressions per action of 8,000. So that's just a better performing ad, and by pausing the top banner, we're actually pushing more impressions to the better performing one to optimize your overall performance. Perfect. So next, let's talk about content and wave optimization. So when looking at wave optimization, what you want to think about here is, again, similar to what we were looking at with the creative. How many actions are we generating from each of these waves? How many impressions per action, etc. And so in looking at these waves here, we can see that this second wave is actually performing really, really well. We're seeing 121 total actions. Impressions per action is at 2,500. This is the best performing asset that we have in this stream. And so what I would do in this case is actually compare it to the first wave here. And let me back up. There's a couple of things that you can do here with wave optimization. First is adjust the sequence of the waves. So in this case, we may want to flip-flop the first and second wave so that our wave 2 actually becomes our wave 1, because this is actually generating the most number of actions and is really kind of hooking that audience. And so we might as well get them on the first try versus the second try. And then our wave 2 would then be the lead accelerator wave here to get them more product-specific messaging. Second option is to turn off waves. So we can turn off various waves if we see that they're consistently not performing. The first option that I would take, though, is to adjust the wave order before turning them off to see if that has an impact on performance. And then the second option I would take is actually turning it off. And then the third option is to add in a new wave with new pieces of content. So if you have a new, let's say a new Forrester report that's coming out, or you have a great new case study by this really well-known client of yours or customer of yours, rotate that in here, because that is going to, one, add recency and relevancy to the assets that you're actually offering your audiences. So that's another option to take when considering optimizations for your waves. And then we talked about streams a little bit earlier in making sure that they're all live, but once they are, the second thing you want to look at, or lastly, I think out of the basic optimizations to make, is stream optimization. So if you find that one of your streams is really just not performing consistently over time, then I would go ahead and turn it off. So we can see here that the sponsored updates in this example, this stream is actually not performing as well as the other streams. So we only have 7 actions. Impressions per action is pretty high compared to the other streams here in this example. And that could be for various reasons, right? Maybe it was launched at a later date. Maybe it was paused in between and these other streams were running longer. So there is some variables to consider. But by looking at just sheer numbers here, this is actually an optimization that I would make, and I would actually pause this stream and let the other streams get the lion's share of the impressions and actions here. One caveat here before you start turning off streams is to make sure that you're actually hitting your contact tier consistently over time. And then also, is there enough data supporting whether or not you should be turning off these streams? So do you have enough impressions for this stream? Have contacts moved all the way through the stream? You know, are you giving enough time before you start making these optimizations? So a couple of caveats there before you start making these optimizations. Okay, great. So now that we have kind of the basics under our belt, let's go ahead and move into the nurture usage and audience. So you've seen this slide before at the beginning of this call. This is, again, our report for our usage. So how many contacts are we nurturing on a given month? And we can see that number here. So this is our average number of contacts. Again, these numbers do fluctuate over time, and you'll see that they do, it will ramp once you immediately launch your program. But what we're really looking at here is how it compares to your contact limit. And so if we're going back to the football stadium analogy, you want to make sure that you're within an acceptable range of this contact tier. And again, that is a plus or minus 10% of this contact limit. Now, in this case, this particular account is not leveraging its full capacity. And so in this case, we're not able to actually, the system itself is not able to run at its full capacity to get optimal performance here. So let's talk about some things that you can do if you're not getting to your full contact limit. So we have a couple of screenshots here. So if you're under your contact limit, which you can see on the right-hand side here, oh, sorry, wrong animation. So let's talk about actually if you're above your contact limit. So if you're above your contracted limit, some of the optimizations that you're going to want to take here is pause your underperforming streams. So we talked about that before. If you're well above your contact limit, then feel free to pause streams that are just consistently not performing. The other thing that you can do here is pause waves. You can shorten the duration of your streams or your waves. So let's say you have a stream that's 30 days long. Shorten it to 25 days so that your contacts are actually moving through that stream more quickly. And if they're not converting on anything, then you can just push them out and remove them from your stream altogether. The other option here is to narrow your audience segment. So, what are your audiences? What are the audiences that you're targeting? Do you have any filtering overlaid onto your streams? So, do you have certain personas that you're trying to go after? And if so, are those within your targeting? If not, then maybe you want to create additional streams or add filtering onto your streams in order to narrow that audience so that you can bring that contact tier down to its contract level. Now let's talk about if you're under your contact limit. So in this case, if you're consistently under your contact limit, and you can see here in this example, we're well below the contracted limit here of 30,000. So some things to think about: broaden your audience. So if you've added business demographic filtering to your streams, you're going to want to broaden that. It's much easier to start broad and narrow in on something than to try to add contacts or audiences to these streams. So definitely think about that. If you only are targeting very specific pages or like 1 or 2 URLs, think about what other URLs would make sense for that audience to receive that series of messaging. The other thing to consider is lengthen your waves or stream duration. Again, if you have a 30-day stream, think about extending it to 40 days. And that's also, you want to think about what your lead flow process typically is as well. So once somebody becomes a lead, how long does it take them to get into SQL or MQL status? And you may want to think about mimicking that in this program. So if it's 45 days, make your streams 45 days. And then finally, leverage the marketing automation integration if you have Marketo or Eloqua. Now, this is a great way to increase your contact band if you have one of those marketing automation systems, because you're able to leverage those lists coming out of your marketing automation system. Perfect. So now let's talk about some audience filtering. I mentioned this briefly in the previous slide, but think about what your audience of this nurture stream is. Now, for your target, this is really inclusive of your page sets. So which URLs are you leveraging for the nurture stream? Are you leveraging thank you pages, so actions, or is it overall site traffic? So homepage bouncers or product pages, etc. In this case, again, what you would want to consider if you're under your usage capacity is think about expanding this target. So think about adding in more pages. Think about using all site traffic instead, or like homepage bouncers or engaged versus just specific pages here. And then also looking at the business demographics. So in this example, you can see, and again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the setup here, but you can see that our audience is really, really narrow. We're targeting only lead accelerator pages that also have a business demographic of marketing or media communications, also in the United States or Canada. So it's a very narrow audience. And one thing that I want to point out here too is that these are ANDed. So the targeting that you can see on the top is ANDed with the filtering. So that's something to keep in mind when you are building out new streams or when you start to optimize. So are you going to narrow your audience too much by ANDing business demographics to your website visitors? And again, by doing that, if you AND them, you can definitely narrow your scale very quickly. And so just going back to our nurturing usage, if you're well under your usage, your nurture usage, you're going to want to remove these filtering options. Okay, cool. So what else? Some other things to consider here is creative best practices. So thinking about what your creative looks like and how to optimize that. So one, call to action. You're going to want to make sure that it's an actionable call to action. So download now, watch now, etc. Two, if leveraging animation, use call to action in every frame. So you're going to want to make sure that download now or watch now is in all of the frames, because otherwise you're not really sure where that user is going to see your ad as far as like which frame they're going to see it in. So make sure that that's available in every frame of the ad. Ensure your logo is in every frame. I know this sounds pretty obvious, but that's something to consider. So you want to make sure your brand is out there and that it's very recognizable to that audience. How to clear value props. So make sure that what you're trying to offer is valuable to that audience. So is it a white paper? Is it a Forrester report? What is going to be useful to this person in order for them to click on your ad in the first place? You can create a sense of urgency. So free trials, make sure that, especially with trials and demos, make sure there's some type of urgency around that so that the user feels like they need to convert now or, forever hold their peace. Obviously, again, this may sound obvious and very simple to a lot of you, but coordinate colors and images. Make sure that it's a cohesive design and it's not a very glaring or unattractive ad. Balancing text and images, going back to attractive versus unattractive creative. Just making sure that it's a cohesive design here. And then finally, make sure that your ad actually is relevant to your landing page. So you want to create that sense of cohesiveness between not only your ads in general, but to where they're going to click through to. You want to make sure that it's cohesive, which I'm actually going to get into here. You want to make sure it matches the creative that you're putting in front of your audience. Otherwise, there's that disconnect, and it's not a very good user experience. For landing page best practices, I covered off on number 1. 2, have a clear, compelling title. Make sure that that you have that it's relevant, that it's clear what the user is going to be getting once they get to your landing page. Same thing with the description. If you have a very quick synopsis of what the content is, it's going to be really helpful in getting that user to convert. Also adding a visual of your content is great, because it breaks up the landing page a little bit. It makes it a little bit more attractive and visually appealing. Including, obviously, for gated assets, a form fill with minimal forms. So the least amount of forms that you can get away with, the better. So if you can get away with 5 fields, do it. If you need 7, then use 7, but as little as possible is optimal here. And then, having a call to action that's visible. We do also recommend having the form fields above the fold if possible. That way, it's very easy for the user to see what they need to do, where the actual submit button is to download the asset. Having that all available in that above the fold is great. And then no or minimal navigation. So make sure that that user has to stay on this page in order to convert, and they don't get distracted by looking at other links on your site. Cool. So some final thoughts here. So start simple. I know this is probably something that your marketing automation consultants have told you during Launchpad sessions, but it's really easy to get complex with this product. So start simple and then start to optimize so that you can either build out more streams for specific audiences, for verticals. You can start to layer in your known audience data. So starting simple is ideal. Leverage new content. So as you get new content in, start to use it. Don't be afraid to add in content as you get it, whether it be blog posts, whether it be, as I mentioned earlier, Forrester reports or case studies. Definitely leverage that within this program because it does create some relevancy and recency. Test and optimize. So I always like to say that this is a living program. You're going to need to give it some love over time. So make sure that you're testing as you go along. Don't just set it and forget it because you're going to want to, as you can see from above, add in new streams. If you start to build out personas or your sales team decides that they want to target specific verticals, you're going to want to adapt the program to that, to the needs of your business. And so just keep that in mind when launching these programs and optimizing, that you're going to always want to kind of look to the future to see what your business needs and how this program can help you get there. And then give your program time. A lot of people want to see results, within the first week, and that's really just not how this program is built. So you're going to want to give it some time to ramp up, to start to see performance, see what works, and then really start to optimize to that. So we typically say about a month, if not a little bit longer, is a good time to start making some adjustments, small tweaks, so some of the basics that we covered, before you start making some major changes to your program. Perfect. And now here's some helpful links for you. So we have an optimization overview. The Help Center is fantastic. It's a fantastic resource. So definitely leverage that. That is available in the LMS platform. There's a little help link on the right-hand side. So there's tons of great information in there. Do leverage that. And then also, as far as content is concerned, I know I touched on that just a little bit. Next month is actually going to be another webinar on content best practices, so definitely tune in for that if you have some availability. And otherwise, I'm done here with optimization best practices. So let's go ahead and move into the Q&A section. Perfect. So as far as testing is concerned, so to A/B test, here's a question here. So to A/B test, do you just set up 2 different nurture streams? Actually, no, it's much simpler than that. So to A/B test your creative, all you're going to want to do is upload 2 variations within that same wave. So within the same nurture stream, let's say we have homepage bouncers, and within wave 1, we want to test out 2 variations of creative. You just upload those 2 creative into wave 1, and you can see the performance as the program continues. Now, I'm going to try to go back here to see if I can get back to that slide, because I think that'll be helpful to see. But it's a really easy way to A/B test your creative here. So showing my screen again here, you can see this is actually within the same wave. It's within the same stream, so it's really easy to understand what performance looks like and really actually measure against each other rather than having two different streams. Now, I should also say that you can also A/B test streams, but that's a different maybe that's a different webinar. Perfect. So here's another question. So when you're serving ads across different channels, how does the platform determine how often ads are served or seen? So that we do have some frequency caps included in the program. So across various streams, now I could be off on this, but I believe we have a frequency cap of about 60 impressions for the lifetime of the stream for display. With Facebook Newsfeed and sponsored content, they actually have their own set of frequency caps, and so those are much more restrictive. For Facebook, I believe it's 2 impressions per user per day, regardless of company. So it can come from any company. A user is only going to see 2 impressions. As far as LinkedIn sponsored content, you can see up to 4 ads in a 48-hour time window from the same company. So if you have sponsored content running, a user could potentially see 4 of your ads in a 48-hour window. Now, that's also why we do recommend having various various ads for sponsored content. So I was saying earlier that social advertising is really easy to A/B test because what you're able to do is just quickly, so with social channels, it's really easy to just change out some of the copy and test out which copy works better. Now, this is also really great if you have streams for specific personas or verticals, because you can call out that audience within the social ads in the copy itself. So like with the LinkedIn sponsored content, we could leverage something like, hey marketers, did you know? Or are you a marketing automation manager? Are you looking to increase your lead flow? So there's a lot of different ways that you can leverage the copy within the social ads to really, to one, A/B test, but to also get the most coverage. Cool, and then we have some, just a couple more questions. So if a contact is in multiple streams, does this count as more than one contact? No. So we've actually recently added a feature, or it's on the back end really. We have deduped the contact band, and so the number of contacts that are in your usage report are actually deduped. So if for some reason a contact does fall into multiple streams, they will not count as 2 contacts in the usage, they will only count as 1. Cool, and then how can I broaden the audiences I nurture? So that's going back to our audience filtering. So in looking at the audiences that we're nurturing, there's a couple of ways to do that. So we can either, one, again, this goes back to also whether or not you're adding filtering to your streams. So in this example here, I have an include functional area equals marketing and functional area equals media and communication. Now, what I would do here, what I would recommend is either remove these business demographics altogether, or if you really don't want specific audiences, use the exclude feature. So there's a drop down here under the business demographics where you can see include, that the drop down will show exclude. So if you really, really don't want certain, let's say, industries, exclude them. So that'll give you more scale versus including just specific audiences. And the reason for that is because we don't have all data on all contacts. So if someone, for instance, doesn't have a marketing cookie that we can see, they won't be included in this stream. And so you want to make sure that you're including as many of your contacts as possible. And by excluding rather than including, you're able to do that. The other option here is under the targeting. So again, if you're only leveraging 1 or 2 pages, like specific product pages, think about what other URLs would make sense to be included in that page set. so that you can broaden that scope of your audience segment. Cool, and then last one here, we have what is the most valuable metric to use to measure success with Lead Accelerator? That's a great question. It's a little bit of a loaded one too, but I would say that it depends on your goals. Now, people hate that response because they don't like it depends, but it really does. And goals really vary by client. If you're looking for strictly generating net new leads, I would say you're going to want to leverage more gated content, and you're going to want to look at your cost per action and your total actions. I look at total actions more so than just post-click, mainly because we do leverage display advertising, and there is an influence that happens with post-view. So considering the total actions versus just post-click, I think it's really important. And then on top of that, if your goal is lead gen, definitely look at, or net new leads, let me clarify that, be more specific there. So if it's net new leads, you're going to want to look at cost per action as well as total actions generated. If your goal is something more like engagement and driving people through the funnel, then leverage ungated and gated assets. And the reason for that is because if you're nurturing people that are coming, let's say, just to your homepage, you don't know anything about them at this point, right? They've gotten to your homepage somehow, but we're not really sure from where. We're not really sure what they're interested in. So definitely think about how you want to get them back to the site to engage. And that's going to be a different measurement than somebody who comes to like your pricing page or a solutions page, because we know that they're going there for specific information, and you can start to put more gated product-specific or pricing information in front of them versus your homepage. You're not going to want to treat them the same. And so in that respect, I actually wouldn't measure them the same either. So it definitely depends. Do we have any other additional questions? Okay, so it looks like we have a question in here regarding exporting reports. And so, yes, we can definitely, you can export reports from the Lead Accelerator dashboard. There is a button actually at the top of the screen in the nurture stream reporting that you can just export, and actually it'll give you data for, it'll be by stream, by wave, and by creative. So it'll give you all of that great information. And then to the point of this question here, can you like compare it and analyze it with your marketing automation reports? And absolutely, you'll definitely want to do that. Oh, and then to access the performance by creative report, it's actually a pretty easy way to do that. All you need to do is actually, under the nurture streams, there's a plus sign and there's a drop-down arrow. So let me actually, in this slide, I can pull it up really quickly. Okay. Sorry, give me just a moment here, everyone. Okay, great. So in this slide, you can see there's a plus sign and there's a drop-down arrow. So all you need to do to see the creative performance report, honestly, is click the plus sign, and that'll bring up your waves that are under this stream. So these are all of our streams here. So the plus sign will expand this and show you your waves, and then you'll see another plus sign for each of those waves, and you'll just expand it again to see all of the creative reporting. So it's all within this dashboard. You don't need to worry about accessing a different report. It's all right in here. It's just a matter of expanding each of these lines. And then we got another question in here. So is it possible to exclude your own organization from retargeting? And this is a question that we get a lot. And unfortunately, at this point, that's not possible. So within this particular program, we are not able to leverage IP, company name targeting. And so we're not able to exclude certain companies' IP addresses from this. It's something our dev team is considering, but we don't have, and product team is considering, but we don't have a timeline around that. So right now, no. However, there is some argument to be made about whether or not it's beneficial to have your own company see ads. I hear both sides of it with my clients. Some say, you know, our sales team always says that they don't see our ads anywhere and they don't think we're doing anything. So in that case, you want them to see your ads. In other cases where you have a very large organization, it may not be worthwhile to be serving ads to everyone in your company, but you know, at this point, we don't have a way of excluding. Great. So it looks like questions have stopped coming in. Again, if there are any, if you do want to follow LinkedIn, there was the Twitter handle at the beginning of the slide, and then there's also those great helpful links at the end of this presentation that I highly encourage everyone to take advantage of because this is available to you. But beyond that, I think this wraps up the webinar. Fabulous. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Appreciate everyone's time.